meeting of the Economic Development and Housing Commission to order. And we will start with the land acknowledgement. And do I have a volunteer who would like to read the land acknowledgement? Yeah. Volunteer.
We would like to acknowledge that the land on which we live, work, learn, and commute is the original homeland of the indigenous people of West Sacramento, who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We acknowledge and we thank the original inhabitants who have occupied, maintained, and secured this place, and who still exist on this land. We respect and celebrate the many diverse indigenous peoples still connected to this land on which we gather. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we go to the next section, seeing that we have an empty seat up here, I'm going to ask Commissioner Kemp if he would like to pick up his name sign and join us at the Big People's Table. Andrew comes, he'll have to sit at the kids' table. All right. And Commissioner Kemp volunteered to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll wait for you to get settled. Okay.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And just a reminder that if you are wishing to address the commission on any agenda item, you need to fill out the request to speak card, which is over on the counter, and present it to the clerk prior to the completion of the staff presentation. Items on the consent agenda will be considered in one motion, and the request to speak card should be turned in prior to the first item on consent. So with that, I believe we go to roll call, which probably was the first thing, and I skipped that.
Commissioner Kim. Commissioner Guerra.
Here.
Commissioner Singh. Commissioner Vasquez.
Here.
Commissioner Cutie.
Here.
Commissioner Rodriguez. Chairperson White.
Here.
Alternate Commission Member Kemp.
Present.
And it looks like Commissioner Kim just arrived.
All right, welcome, Commissioner Kim. So the first item on our agenda is presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda and within the jurisdiction of this committee.
There were no comments from the public for this meeting.
Thank you so much. Then we will move on to agenda item number 2, a presentation about the Bridge District Finance Strategy. And this is great timing because I actually have a question for you about this at the end.
Now I am. Good evening, commissioners. Hi. It's nice to see all of you. The last time I saw you was when I was here. I think it was in May, and I also got to know all of you during our orientation. So again, I'm Katie Yancey. I'm the Community Investment Manager in the Economic Development and Housing Department. This evening, I have the honor of introducing you to my new associate who joined us in June and has been my right-hand person in working on the Bridge District financing update and will also be assisting me in the Grand Gateway. So tonight, I'm going to introduce Mark Polhamus, and he's going to be doing tonight's presentation and continuing the work that we all discussed at our orientation at our last meeting. So thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you, Katie. Evening, commissioners. Evening, Commissioner Chair. So this evening, I'm going to be presenting on updates that we have about the Bridge District financing strategy and also Grand Gateway updates. And what I'll be presenting this evening really is a continuation of some of the presentations that you heard in May, particularly what Katie Yancey had addressed about ways in which the city is trying to, improve development feasibility conditions, particularly in our infill areas. So you'll hear a lot of kind of the same themes coming out, ways that we're trying to improve development conditions. And so you'll get some updates really about, what it is that work that we're doing in the community investment team to effectuate and really to try to catalyze growth within these areas. So some of it's going to be kind of dense. So if at any point you have any questions, as I transition from one slide to another, please feel free to chime in case you have any questions. I appreciate that. So this slide, this one, I want to show this slide. Katie had presented this graphic to you in the last presentation, in the last meeting. And it's really indicative. It characterizes the work that we do on the community investment team. What community investment is, how it's defined to the city, and that we prioritize our investments in infrastructure, planning, and real estate so that we can establish conditions where we are catalyzing growth, expanding our property tax base, as well as expanding opportunities for other tax growth, such as sales taxes, in other revenue generation. And so the way that we conduct and support community investment is to, we wear many hats on the community investment team. So first, we work with planning. We work with the planning department to ensure that targeted projects have the certainty to obtain entitlement to develop and securing all required permits necessary to begin building. So in California, this has become a really complex process, especially as we have to work across many agencies, many regulatory agencies at the local, statewide, and federal level. So what we do is we work with planning. Particularly in our infill growth areas, we've implemented specific plans. And these are regulatory documents that establish the land use regulation and development standards, also identifies public infrastructure and facilities requirements, and implementation and funding strategies. And importantly, specific plans are subject to environmental review under the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA. Specific plans increase the certainty of development as they provide programmatic environmental clearance. So if a development proposed is generally consistent with the land use, design, and development standards, projects have a relative ease in going through the design review, for the various approvals and review processes. Next. So for most of the city's incorporated history, we use the authorities granted under redevelopment law to use property tax increment or future growth in property tax revenues within a defined area to remove dozens of barriers, such as removing separated grade roadways, removing and remediating hazardous substances, and creating physical connections within our community. And so while some of that authority to conduct this work has been limited through the dissolution of redevelopment over 10 years ago, this is still a priority, prioritizing investing in infrastructure to catalyze investments in real estate. So therefore, we work closely with capital projects to ensure that we coordinate public improvements to align with private sector needs to induce growth. And last, and which was the primary subject of last meeting that Katie discussed, we work closely with the finance department to ensure that our costs on development are not feasibly prohibitive. So to realize this mission, we need these three elements working together to mitigate risks to the market. We need to ensure development can occur within a timely fashion, that there's adequate capacity in our infrastructure systems to accommodate growth, and we need to ensure our cost structures are not a deterrence for our targeted growth. So in the May meeting, Katie Yancey had discussed some of the programs that the city has implemented to reduce barriers to achieving new growth in our infill communities. So you may recall this graphic. It is an analysis that consulting firm EPS had generated where they compared the development building impact fees on development in competing submarkets in Sacramento and West Sacramento. So these 4 on the right-hand side, they're Tier 1 Bridge District, Tier 2 Bridge District, Washington District, and the Central Business District. And the outcome of that analysis was that our infill areas of the Washington District and the Central Business District were really an impediment. Our development impact fee structures in those areas are an impediment to growth. And taking a step further, they conducted pro forma feasibility analyses, which is a financial tool that they use to be able to determine preliminarily if a project can pencil or not. And in this analysis, as you'll see on the right-hand side, the 2 bars on the right, we needed to put a gap. We needed to find a gap, reduce costs by between $20,000 to $25,000 per unit for multifamily development, in order for our projects to even come close to have some preliminary feasibility to pencil out, to be considered to develop. So we put this into action. We put this information into action by implementing the fee reduction program for Central Business and Washington districts, applying reduced impact fee rates for those fees that are imposed by the city. So in August 2022, the city adopted a resolution which decreased fees by approximately 60% for residential and 40% for office and mixed-use development within those 2 districts, Washington and Central Business. And as a pilot, this program will run for 3 years with the opportunity to extend for 2 additional years at the city manager's discretion. So we're already seeing some successes of this program. When adopted, the city had indicated that the success of these proposed fee reform programs may not be known for a while, as the program would conclude somewhere between 2025 to 2027, depending on whether or not those 2-year extensions would be granted. However, after being in place for a little over 1 full year, the city has locked in reduced fee rates for significant development in the Washington district, 440 West, comprising 106 higher density single family units. These would be ownership units, kind of like townhomes. But as you can see, this, if you have any familiarity with the site, it's been a long vacant area. And so we're going to be, we've locked in a development that's going to bring in high quality, in kind of targeted housing products that we want to see, that we've been trying to attract in this area for a long time. And so what the city recently agreed upon with the developer, we've agreed to terms on a development agreement, which is a tool that local agencies use to impose conditions on developments, such as parkland dedications, developer-led offsite improvements, and other financial obligations such as impact fees. And as you may be aware, development projects can take years to go from concept to completion. So along the way, regulatory changes may occur that can result in unanticipated added costs, further delaying or impacting the financial feasibility of a project. So to mitigate this uncertainty, developers and agencies execute development agreements to vest projects for a defined time frame based on financial and regulatory conditions that exist at that time. And so including the pilot program, development impact fee rates was instrumental to getting this project to move forward. With the impact fee reduction program, we've reduced their fees by approximately $4.1 million for the entire project. And as a bartering chip, what we got out of it was a shorter vesting period from that developer. They had initially wanted a 10-year vesting period. We were able to negotiate to a 5-year vesting period. So what that results in is, one, they get the reduced fee rates, they get locked into those. However, we get dedications quicker. We get this project moving forward faster. We get those a park space created out of this in a much quicker time frame. So what this does is it adds certainty, it reduces risks, and meanwhile doing that, we're able to increase our quality housing stock, increase assessed property values, in turn generating increased property tax revenues. We add park and recreation amenities, and indirectly, 440 West and other recent projects in Washington increase the market appeal for this kind of desired development in the Washington district. So this helps attract additional private investment, reduce market risks related to those, discounted revenues that you've heard in other presentations and that I'll also bring up later. This impact will induce further growth in Washington district. So in the May commission meeting, Katie Yancey, she had mentioned that we were going to bring forward 3 topics for your consideration. One of them that I'll be talking about today is our progress and our next steps on the potential extension of the Bridge District Tier 1 fee structure. Also mentioned was the need for the city to develop a new pathway to reevaluate and retool our existing development impact fee programs, as they're causing they're an impediment to the type of growth that we desire. I'll provide a brief update on that. In addition, I'll provide a brief update on where we are with the potential expansion of our fee reduction pilot. So as Katie mentioned in May, we had a consultant a little over a year ago go through and review and scrutinize our development impact fee programs. And what we're able to find out from that was that our impact fee programs are woefully out of date, and they're also not structured for the type of growth that we desire or the type of growth that we forecast in our near future. Most of our development impact fee programs, they were adopted in the early 2000s, where a lot of the growth that was anticipated in our community was going to be suburban in nature and primarily within Southport. However, due to statewide legislation and targets to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, that focus on our development, on our growth as a city is going to be influenced towards higher density, closer to job centers. So that switch, and this is something that's coming down from state and federal regulatory and grant funding agencies. So as a result, we have to go through and change some of our impact fee programs so that they can be targeted, that they can be adjusted more towards the types of units that we see in urban context. 1 to 2 bedrooms occupied generally by 1 to 2 people, as opposed to a large suburban home, 3 to 5 bedrooms occupied by 3+ people. Smaller units equal smaller demand. Our fee structures are not designed that way. They haven't been adjusted or necessarily designed to accommodate that. Commissioner, did you have a question? I think I saw. Okay. So where we are in that process, we're in the process of updating our water and our sewer master plans, those costs, as well as our allocation methodologies. Those should be updated sometime in 2024. And we recently updated in 2019 our park impact fee, and we will also be commencing an update to our traffic impact fee. So water, sewer, traffic, parks, those are really a bulk of where you might see a lot of our fees generated. So we're focusing on those first. Next, we've discussed in thorough, Katie had mentioned the analysis that went into our fee reduction pilot program and how we targeted that first in infill growth areas of Central Business District and Washington District. We are going through the process right now of determining our next steps on that. And first consideration perhaps is to expand this program to those districts that are enhanced infrastructure finance district, our tax increment pool that is primarily citywide, that's in those areas that are highlighted. Excluding those that have the X, because a couple of the specific plan areas in Southport, they have their own specialized fee program. So at this time, we're not considering that. In addition, we may consider expanding this to all areas north of the deep water channel, as we understand, and the narrative is that we need to catalyze infill growth throughout the north part of our city, throughout the entire community. So we want to do what we can to be able to ensure that we're we're making that achievable. All right. So finally, to get into the updates about the Bridge District financing strategy. The city recognized in 2009 to 2010 that the city's fee programs are not designed for urban infill product types. The city's fee programs are based on demand assumptions consistent with those larger units that I mentioned before. And so acknowledging this dynamic where the assumed demands were not matching the prototypes, the products that would be developed in the Bridge District, we removed the Bridge District from the city's development impact fee program. So what we did was, sorry, lost the track there. What we did was we pulled them from the city's programs and established revised demand assumptions and cost allocations that are more typical of urban and infill products. This again is kind of the same step that we're trying to take with the greater development impact fee programs for those programs that I mentioned that we're updating currently. So additionally, the Bridge District financing strategy acknowledged that early development projects in the Bridge District would be pioneering, high risk, and will sell at or rent at discounted prices relative to comparable projects in Sacramento's downtown and midtown neighborhoods. This is mainly because, with urban living, you had the amenities of restaurants, you had the amenities of attractions. We did not have this critical mass yet developed in the Bridge District. We're creating a downtown from the ground up. So what we need to do is we need to incentivize that first tranche, the first initial phases of development. So what we implemented with the Bridge District Finance Plan was a tiered structure of our development impact fee program. What I'll show you next is the one-time special taxes that act as a development impact fee for the Bridge District. And so without any intervention, this fee structure will increase to Tier 2 soon, which could significantly increase development impact fee costs for new development of the Bridge District. And if you recall from the EPS study that Katie referenced several times in May, the transition from Tier 1 to Tier 2 will increase the impact fees by about 2/3 their current levels. And if you recall from that study, development feasibility may be challenged at these rates. And so what I'll go into some detail this evening is, I'll provide some background about the Bridge District facility financing to give you a better picture of how development impact fees play a role in that equation. And I'll provide an overview of the steps the city will take to determine whether we can extend Tier 1 beyond the 1 million square foot threshold and any other potential challenges or changes this faces for the financing landscape. So to understand the Bridge District financing strategy, it's important to understand what we need to fund and, of course, how much revenue we need to generate. So Bridge District build-out, which the city anticipated in 2009, 2010 to comprise about 9.5 million square feet of development. And that would be a breakdown of approximately 4,000 units and 5.5 million square feet of commercial space. Again, building up from the ground an urban environment in a downtown. So the infrastructure and facilities that existed before the Bridge District were obsolete and non-existent. Therefore, we've had to invest tens of millions of dollars in infrastructure and other improvements to accommodate this new growth. So when the city updated the specific plan in 2009 and 10, we included an implementation strategy to identify all the needed infrastructure improvements, how they would work together to support new growth, and the costs to construct them. So the implementation strategy, it identified two main categories of improvements: backbone facilities and supplemental improvements. The backbone facilities are well-defined improvements necessary to support build-out. These include roadways, sidewalks, transit facilities, water, sewer, wastewater, neighborhood parks, and the Riverwalk. The supplemental improvements represent longer-term investments in regional amenities, including additional rail line and rail yard removal, supplemental Riverwalk amenities, corridor amenities, and structured parking. So a key takeaway here is that this costs a lot of money to do, costs a lot of money in community reinvestment, redevelopment, and it takes a lot of public funding to be able to do so. Coordination be able to, time this and finance this right to be able to line up with the market. So when this was completed in 2010, the estimated total cost of those improvements would exceed $250 million. As we all know, costs are only increasing. So that's part of why we're kind of going through a little bit more holistic approach to figure out where we are right now with our infrastructure development and with those costs, and how that plays an impact on our development moving forward. So we have a pretty complex formula in how we pay for these. We leverage both public and private capital to fund improvements through various taxing mechanisms, regional, state, and federal grants, and private developer contributions. And for purposes of cost allocation and developer cost reimbursements, we assign these costs based on 4 categories: regional, bridge district, parcel, and other. Regional facilities represent those that are of citywide or regional importance, and will have the beneficiaries are more than just those in the bridge district. So they include significant regional facilities such as the Riverwalk Promenade and some of the roadway arterials. Bridge district facilities represent improvements that are predominantly of benefit to the bridge district in whole or part, and these include localized utilities, neighborhood parks, collector roads, and related improvements. Parcel improvements are those that have the beneficiary of primarily those parcels or a couple properties, and others represent improvements that are predominantly a benefit to a parcel or set of parcels outside of the bridge district. And these include some certain roadways and utility improvements that may occur concurrently with bridge district improvements. Something I want to highlight here is that transit and other circulation, it does have a highlight, and I'll go into more detail about that later. But part of the reason why we're conducting a more holistic finance strategy evaluation is because the plans for transit in the bridge district and for the city of West Sacramento have changed since the 2009-2010 specific plan update was completed. And this may implicate or alter the available funding sources we have for our planned transit improvements. And so on the right-hand side, there's a list of some of the primary funding sources for backbone infrastructure and supplemental improvements. And the city has been progressive in implementation of several public financing tools that allow flexibility to respond to changing market conditions and public improvement priorities. And so the city has used this layered public financing approach consisting of community facilities district, tax increment financing tools, development impact fees, and grants to fund improvement. And shown here is a snapshot of the funding sources and how they would work together to be able to facilitate the construction of our backbone improvements. These are the cost estimates as of 2009. And as you'll see, most of the funding, about 2/3 on the left-hand column, I'll point. Right there, about 2/3 of that backbone infrastructure funding would come from CFD. CFD 27 is our primary funding mechanism, and that is the tool that is that we have used to structure that tier 1, tier 2 impact fees. So it's critical that we evaluate these costs now, so that we have an understanding whether or not we can proceed with the prolonging of the tier 1 rate. And so to further facilitate bridge district facility development and financing, we've prioritized bridge district backbone infrastructure and supplemental improvements using 5-year CIPs. And rather than approach public improvements piecemeal, the city has prepared these 5-year CIPs to prepare development-ready sites. And this approach has been efficient and effective for working with the property owners and also providing required information to city council, bond consultants, and council during debt issuances using our public financing districts. So this is a snapshot of the costs and funding sources used to construct the 2014 plan, which initiated the first phase of development that's clustered between Mill and Bridge streets. The 2014 plan was driven by a $23 million grant awarded to the city as part of the California Prop 1C funding program. And the city secured this grant with the commitment of working with Bridge District landowners to develop 731 residential units, of those being 198 affordable. So as we look at the funding more comprehensively, we see that about half of the funding came from grants, boxed in green, and the other half was generated from either tax increment or special tax district as shown in the yellow box. However, if you call from the last slide, the Bridge District implementation strategy projected that approximately 2/3 of the backbone infrastructure would be financed from CFDs, and primarily that coming from CFD 27. So considering, provided that contextual consideration, we have to evaluate whether we have sufficient funding capacity to determine whether we can extend Tier 1 or not. So a little more context on CFD 27. It's comprised of a few different components. It's a special tax district that was adopted in 2010. And the components, one is an annual special tax that is charged to taxable properties to fund annual costs of bond debt service and directly funds authorized facilities on a pay-as-you-go basis. And additionally, CFD 27 has 2 one-time special tax components that are charged to new development prior to inspection. The Bridge District one-time special tax funds local serving infrastructure such as localized circulation, utilities, neighborhood parks, and other related improvements. The second one-time special tax, OTST, is the regional district regional OTST, which funds construction of regionally authorized facilities. And this is a direct substitute for many of the city's citywide development impact fees. And these are based on level of service requirements for urban development projects. And this fee substitutes childcare, city hall, courtyard, fire, police, water, and sewer connection costs. And what's important to consider, as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, that the city implemented this tiered approach to remove barriers for initial development phases, as these developments would be pioneering for the West Sacramento's re-envisioned waterfront. And so these fee levels were approved to end once that total development threshold in CFD 27 reaches 1 million square feet. And once we hit 1 million square feet without any intervention, we trigger the Tier 2 rates, which will increase those fees by about 67%. And we are currently at 800,000 square feet of total developed uses in CFD 27. And depending on the size of the development, we're just 1 to 2 projects away from hitting that threshold. So therefore, we're going through this analytical process to bring forward a recommendation to the City Council to determine if it makes sense to extend the Tier 1 OTST rates based on the forthcoming study. So additionally, it's important for the city to do what is in our control to encourage growth in our community, because we're facing other forces well outside of our control that are making development exceedingly difficult to achieve. So shown here, annual percent change in construction and building costs and apartment rent rates. So for further clarification, the blue line, it's not showing up well here. Is it showing on your screens all right? Okay, the blue line is construction cost index. The orange line is a building cost index. These are kind of similar indices that the construction industry uses, similar to like the CPI that we use to judge, to determine, how inflation is. These are used to estimate or to evaluate kind of the growth or the change in costs in building and construction in this industry. So as you'll see, the change in construction and building costs have been relatively in sync with apartment rent changes from 2015 to 2020. However, the building and construction industries, as I'm sure you recall during seeing news during the height of the pandemic, were significantly impacted by cost increase, impacted by supply chain disruptions and labor impact. So what this has done is resulted in an environment where building and construction costs have significantly exceeded rental appreciation over the past several years. So this only reflects the impacts associated with various trades, and compounding these challenges are increases in interest rates, which has significantly increased the cost of financing construction in the past year as well. So provided this additional context, we're at a critical point in Bridge District development, so we must take a comprehensive look at whether our financing approach can support this Tier 1 extension, and what recommendations we have for council to ensure we're doing what we can within our control to mitigate risks to the public and private parties in the Bridge District. Yes? I was gonna, if you have any questions, feel free to chime in. If something you have, like, right now, I'm more than happy to address, in between slides. So if I could reiterate, the question is whether we could consider extending the tier 1 rates for specific uses as opposed to all of them. Because right now the tiered rates are for all use, for residential, for office, for retail. It's something we could evaluate or could consider, perhaps on a policy basis. I think a challenge with that maybe is that a lot of the developments that may come through are going to be mixed use in nature. So providing that benefit, I think we at least at this point, we want to make sure that we're providing an incentive, we're extending an incentive to all types of development uses within the Bridge District, whether it's use of residential, office, or retail. Katie, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Oh, and Commissioner Kim, I think your mic wasn't on when you were asking the question. Letting you know.
So thank you. Yeah, I apologize for interjecting, but I did want to just make 2 quick comments. So the tier 1 and the tier 2 is a structure that's in the existing RMA, which is the document that created the CFD. So we don't have the ability to make a lot of changes. We can undercollect fees. And the difference between tier 1 and tier 2 is that we would choose to not collect a certain percentage of the fees. So to answer your question, if this is something that the commission is interested in having us look at instead of across the board, under collecting fees, but specifically under collecting fees for certain types of uses, we can absolutely do that. And that would be the type of use that would be the building structure. In terms of the recreation improvements, we already have incentives in place for something that we refer to as distributed park elements in the Bridge District. So up to 1.5 acres of projects that want to come in and put in these distributed park elements. These components that are like, hey, I'm going to be building a basketball court, or I'm going to build a foyer, or I'm going to put in a fountain, or whatever that may be. Something that adds to the character and the nature, creates areas of respite, or actually creates active recreation opportunities. We have a system in place to reduce their Bridge District one-time special taxes in recognition of those recreational components. So it would not be part of the current fee structure that we're looking at, which is the under collection to remain competitive in the market when it comes to recreation improvements, because we already have a robust incentive in place. But we could receive direction this evening to look at, instead of across the board reducing tier 2, only reducing the tier 2 for certain types of uses.
Thank you for that. And then also for, again, the fact that we're reducing these fees, and one of the, the benefits we get is shorter vesting period, right? Is there any other mechanisms the city has considered as a potential benefit for reducing fees for the developers besides shorter vesting periods? Or are there other cities that have reduced their development fees, but have found some mechanism to get paid on the back end, I guess, besides shorter vesting periods?
That's a great question. And so the whole reason why the shorter vesting periods is so important is because of our property tax structure. So this city receives a very large percentage of its property taxes in comparison to other jurisdictions. And because we formed an infrastructure financing district, and in the Bridge District, we have an infrastructure financing district and an enhanced infrastructure financing district, When we see projects go online sooner rather than later, we see that revenue, that investment come in through the property tax mechanisms. So it comes into the general fund, it goes into the IFD fund that's in the Bridge District, and then it goes into the general EIFD fund that covers a large portion of the north part of the city. So what we see, to your point, is that by not collecting it, okay, you're coming in today, I'd like all of my money today to cover these impacts of growth. What we're saying is, in recognition of some of these areas that have these other tax increment financing structures available to us, we're saying, hey, you can pay for your infrastructure on the back end. You can pay through your property tax assessments. And so that is a major component. So that's a great question. And that's mainly what we're trying to do, is leverage the fact that we do have these tax increment financing mechanisms in place. And so that's why we're like, we don't need to collect the dollar today. We can collect 50 cents today, and we can collect that remaining 50 cents over the next 5-10 years, because you've said, I'm going to build sooner, because it's only costing me 50 cents to get in the door, and I'm going to get that 50 cents down the road as I'm collecting it through my tax increment financing mechanisms.
Okay, that's
Thank you for letting me interrupt. Appreciate that.
And further to that point too, the CFD 27 does have an annual special tax component. So as new development occurs, there's a special tax that is quantified on the developable square footage. So they're set, we, by gaining that developed, by going from an undeveloped parcel to a developed parcel, we get more special tax accumulation that we're able to contribute either to develop or to pay for infrastructure on an as-you-go basis, so as it's needed, or to contribute that to bond debt finance, to our debt issue. Okay, so shown here is our financing strategy update process and what we need to do. So first, as mentioned, we need to go through engineering updates. We have to go through various circulation changes. As it was contemplated in the Bridge District specific plan, we're going to have a streetcar into Bridge District in the city of West Sacramento. That has changed. What we're considering now, what we're evaluating now, is to partner with Regional Transit to extend the Gold Line, Regional Transit's Gold Line, into West Sacramento, changing that from a local infrastructure component to a more regional infrastructure component. And as you recall, we have specific financing mechanisms that can be used based on various cost allocations. So that kind of influences our formula for how we're going to be moving forward in how we pay for things. And so once we have those circulation changes, we're going to embed that into infrastructure exhibits. And we have a civil engineer who is going through and putting together cost estimates for us. So once we have an idea of what those remaining facilities are, what the costs for those facilities are, then we can go through a process which Katie had just mentioned, where we put together development and revenue projections. So then we project out what is going to be our anticipated development, what kind of development are we going to see occur within the Bridge District over the next 10, 20, 30 plus years. And based on the revenue sources that we have, where we have tax increment financing, we have special taxes, we have development impact fees, we're going to see what is our break even. Can we consider doing that extension of this tier 1? So after we conduct all of that work, or we've commissioned all of that work, we'll have, we'll be able to have a little bit more certainty as to, whether or not it's feasible to prolong tier 1 and to what extent we can prolong tier 1. So there's a little more breakdown. We've already contracted with AECom and with Wood Rogers. They're preparing some infrastructure exhibit updates. Primarily AECom is handling the circulation network updates. They had previously worked with us on the Pioneer Bluff and Stonelock reuse master plan exhibit. So they're expanding, they're expanding their exhibit so that we have a very holistic riverfront circulation network diagrams that we can then plug into and give over to Wood Rogers, who prepared the initial cost exhibit, cost estimates for the 2009-2010 specific plan update. Once we have that, then we're going to move forward with our financing strategy update. So the proposed scope of work for that is to evaluate our projected revenues for various development scenarios. And we're basing those development scenarios on what was in the Bridge District expected build out and also updated development forecasts that have been generated by SACOG, and it's going into their updated blueprint. And so what you'll notice here is that in 2010, we're anticipating the Bridge District to develop about 9.6 million square feet of development with a heavier balance towards commercial square footage. We would have about 4 million square feet of residential and about 5.5 million square feet of commercial and primarily office uses. We know that a lot has changed with the real estate environment, with what's going to be proposed office. There's a lot of office vacancies within our market. In addition, the updated blueprint is changing the configuration as to how our region may grow. So what they're imposing on the city of West Sacramento and within the Bridge District is that we're going to see a greater lean towards residential development, about a 2-to-1 ratio of residential to commercial uses. So we have to factor in, how does that play a role in our financing strategy? How does that play a role in our projected revenues? And then also, what are going to be some other implications policy-wise related to this change in this switch from residential to from commercial to residential growth? Once we have that done, we'll present those recommendations on the potential extension of Tier 1 fees and other financing strategy and policy considerations to the City Council. And this will occur, this is all going to occur concurrently. So right now we're late November, early December. We're going to be contacting some on-call consultants to conduct the financing consulting activities. As mentioned, we're already underway on our circulation network. And we have already commissioned Wood Rogers to complete the infrastructure facilities updates, the infrastructure cost updates. So the story of this is we're working on tight timeline. We're getting a lot done. We're doing a lot of work concurrently so that we can try to solve this problem as fast as possible, because as I mentioned, we're 1 to 2 projects away from hitting that 1 million square foot threshold. Questions on that before I move into Grand Gateway?
So for the 440 West development project, like, what was the indicator that they developed there, or Black Pine communities came here and because of the reduced fees over them just wanting to be in West Sac? Because Black Pine has had big plans of wanting to grow in West Sac. I just from personal understanding of their business plan. So was there some kind of indicator, some kind of survey, or some kind of thing that said, oh, it is the reduced fees that triggered that?
I'll turn it over to Katie on that, since she's the project manager of that.
So again, so Black Pine did not indicate that their reasoning for coming was because of the reduced impact fee program that we had just approved. They did have a vesting document. So in 2007, Dave Weston, who's a name that some of you may be familiar with, had a project named Allura that was on half of the site that makes up the Black Pine 440 West site. He did go through the process of getting some entitlements, which included vesting him in the 2007 impact fee program. So in an indirect way, yes, having reduced impact fees because he was vested in the 2007 impact fee program very much attracted Black Pine to the site. And when they originally came to the city, what they had intended to do was merge these other parcels that they had acquired with this 2007 vesting. Well, the 2007 vesting is not nearly as advantageous as this new fee reduction program that we have. So to put in rough numbers, I apologize, I have a spreadsheet somewhere, so I'm going to do my best to remember the numbers here. But rough numbers, it's about $6.5 million if we don't have the fee reduction program. Under the 2007, it's roughly like $4.5 million. And under our new impact fee reduction, it's like 2.8. So they were already attracted to that, let's say $2 million savings that they were going to receive by buying property that had entitlements on it that vested them in an old fee structure. But what really brought them to the table and got them to participate in building a neighborhood park and got them to participate in doing enhanced frontage standards, which are going to be consistent with the yet-to-be-adopted Washington-specific plan. They were not required to go to those standards, but they said, we will go to those standards. And they said, we'll build the park in 24 months, and we'll build the frontage in 18 months. And we're going to set the park up so that it can have public art, and we're going to also agree to participate in a future assessment that covers the O&M of that park, was because we said, we will vest you in those impact fees. So you don't have to worry that in 3 years or in 4 years, when that pilot impact fee program comes up, when we don't renew it, for the 5 years that you are in this development agreement, phasing out your project, your pro forma will always carry those reduced impact fees. So that's how, to put it in parentheses, that's how the sausage was made in that deal, was that we got these public benefits out of them in exchange for, we're going to get our property taxes sooner, and we're going to get these public benefits. So that's what did it. But what brought them to the table was that 2007 fee structure that immediately saved them $2 million.
Thank you. And
Welcome.
thank you for the presentation.
All right.
Thank you both.
I'll be a little bit more brief in my discussion about the Grand Gateway development opportunity that I'm not sure if anyone has been aware of. This one wasn't on the this wasn't discussed in the May 2023 commission meeting, but we have some updates. We have some progress that we're making on the Grand Gateway development opportunity, and we thought it'd be a great time to present our progress with that with you all. All right, so this area, Grand Gateway area, it's dubbed Grand Gateway due to its location. It's an 8.6 acre site that fronts both historic US Route 40 and the western portion of Capitol Avenue. It's convergence of 3 distinct planning areas: Washington District, Bridge District, and West Capitol Avenue Central Business District. So for the city to sell this property, it's all 8.6 acres of city-owned property. It's been in our management agenda for about a decade to dispose of this property and sell it to a private developer to acquire, to develop on it. So for the city to sell this property, the city was required to comply with the California Surplus Land Act. And the state has recently adopted amendments to the SLA, Surplus Land Act, SLA, or the Act. They've recently adopted amendments to the SLA with the goal of strengthening and facilitating use of publicly owned surplus property with the goal of developing affordable housing development. So pursuant to the Act, the city must take formal action by adopting a resolution to declare the property as surplus or exempt surplus property. So if a jurisdiction declares a property as surplus, it must make it first available to affordable housing developers before seeking other development proposals. And by declaring a property as exempt surplus property, a jurisdiction is not subjected to that process. Instead, it must solicit buyers and developers through a public competitive process. However, by declaring a property as exempt surplus property, state law stipulates that the development shall result in a mixed-use development with at least 300 residential units, of which 25% must be affordable to low-income households. So in June 2023, the city adopted a resolution declaring the property as exempt surplus property. Therefore, the city seeks a mixed-use, mixed-income development that will result in at least 300 units, with 25% of those being affordable to low income. And so the city has a long storied history with this site. Dating back to the early 1990s, the city had conducted several planning activities: the Triangle, which is now known as the Bridge District Specific Plan, West Capitol Avenue Action Plan, Washington District. All of these set a vision for how we're going to, how they're going to set a vision and policies, guidelines, implementation measures as to how we are going to change, this area. It was prior to what it is now. It was remnants of State Route 275. Also, the siting of some nuisance uses, such as an adult bookstore and a pay-by-the-hour motel. So, in 1994, the redevelopment agency had acquired Tower Court, which was the site of that adult bookstore, also a site of an auto shop. And so what we were able to do next is the city had acquired State Route 275 in 2000. with that, the state of California, they had relinquished 275 to the city of West Sacramento. It, at the time, acted like a freeway. It was grade separated, had only on-ramps, off-ramps, off-ramps, nothing reflective of the type of kind of community scale intersection, community scale thoroughfares that you see now there with Tower Bridge Gateway and West Capitol Avenue. So in 2006, 2008, the city had finished the west phase of Tower Bridge Gateway, removing some of that grade separation. In addition, had acquired the Experience Motel, which is up by on the kind of northern portion of the site, abutting the railroad beam berm, and located close to Capitol Bowl. And then 2013, city conducted even more planning activities with the approval of a Grand Gateway Master Plan. This master plan, it is a cohesive piece, it's a cohesive document that unifies and sets development design standards, taking in these pieces of the West Capitol Avenue Action Plan, Washington District, and Bridge District. It creates a unified vision and streamlined development standards so that, you know, we could, again, the activities of the community investment team are to invest in planning, infrastructure, and real estate so that we can expedite some of these approval processes. 2015, 2016, with this document, the city pursued, they acquired Tower Court, and also pursued the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Grant. It's a state grant in which we were to implement many of the transportation facility improvements that you see that exist around there today, pedestrian, cycling, transit improvements, completed those and as in addition with Westgate Phase 1, 2017-2018. Then in 2020, the city acquired the roadway in. It's a state home key site that we use as to provide housing for the unhoused. It's it's a state program that came out during the pandemic to try to house those who are vulnerable to the pandemic. So we use funds from that, as well as leveraging funds from federal government and from the county to be able to acquire that site. Next, we adopted Resolution 2352 to declare this property as exempt surplus land. We issued an RFP to acquire for a developer to acquire and develop the property in August, closing that in October 2023. And in the next week or so, we're going to be entering into an exclusive negotiation agreement with the development team to acquire and develop the site. So I want to show this image. This is May 2002. This right here is a reflection of what this site looked like before we had implemented any of the infrastructure changes. All that we've done at this point is we completed our planning activities. We've done that work, the policy work, the strategy work, to lay the foundation for what we would be doing in the next 20 years to be able to effectuate this and be able to make this a developable property, create a prime development opportunity, and also have a welcoming entrance to our city, to our riverfront from the west side, and create this entrance to our civic space coming from the. This is what it looks like today. This is a development site layout. The project area comprises 4 developable blocks and consists of 7 legal parcels. As you see, development block 1 is 2.84 acres, and it runs triangularly up along the railway berm, and it is the site of former Experience Motel, as well as the Old Town Inn Suites, that's another city-acquired property that we had used to house the homeless, and it was a program that we had used for a couple years. So what we're doing is we're intentional about how we approach our planning, our real estate, our infrastructure activities. It's a long game that we're playing to be able to create additional value to our city. State Route 275, DB3, Development Block 3, had some excess, had the on-ramps, off-ramps from State Route 275 after the relinquishment of State Route 275 from the state to the city. we're able to we're able to add that to that development parcel and make it developable land. Again, adding land value and furthering our community investment strategy. Next, development block 2, that's the current site of the former Roadway Inn, the 40-room motel that is currently California Home Key site, which the city acquired and operates through the Home Key program. So this program, we have stipulations till 2025 to operate this as a Home Key site, and after 2025, this site may be redeveloped as another use. Development block 3 in the center, as I mentioned, it's the largest development block, comprised the former Tower Court, which was automotive shop and relinquished portions to State Route 275. And also, as you'll notice, adjacent to development block 1 is an area that is designated as a public plaza. It's outlined in, I believe, red. It shows their proposed parcel boundary. It's about 0.4 acres, and the RFP stipulated that any proposal would need to include land uses and frontage types that are supportive of public spaces. For instance, ground floor retail, which opens to and augments a plaza, which are our desired uses here. And to reiterate, this piece will remain under public ownership that will support permanent public art features and host programmed activities and events. So what's unique about Grand Gateway is that it sits at the convergence of those 3 city planning areas, West Cap, Washington District, Bridge District. In 2013, the city completed the Grand Gateway Master Plan, which provided a cohesive document to establish design guidelines and standards for the future development of this area. So this has served as the basis for our public improvements, which is reflected in the streetscape improvements, bicycle, pedestrian, and transit enhancements that border the development site. And this document was instrumental in the city's efforts to secure grants to complete these public improvements in 2018. And these standards and guidelines contained in the master plan will provide the prospective master developer with a clear pathway to meet our development objectives. And so here's the city. We have closed the proposal submission period in October, and we have selected a development team comprising of SKK Developments and Urban Core Development, combination of a market rate and affordable housing developers, to enter into an exclusive negotiating agreement, or ENA. And this ENA period allows the development team to conduct its due diligence to determine whether the proposed concept shown above is feasible. So the proposed development includes 458 total residential units, of which 117 would be affordable. That meets the 25% requirement stipulated in the Surplus Land Act. Also meeting that requirement is 300 plus units as shown here. Those affordable units would be offered on development blocks 2 and 4, current side of the Home Key, and development block 4, which is the most eastern development block on this property. And as you'll notice, the proposed concept carries forward design elements encouraged in the Grand Gateway Master Plan, and for the most part, buildings front the streets, and parking is either tucked behind buildings on surface lots or enclosed on other uses, as shown in development block 3, where there's a proposed parking structure internal to the site. And further, the massing is consistent with the Grand Gateway Master Plan, and the proposed uses are consistent with site zoning designations. So the city, this development will be a public-private partnership between the city and the selected development team. And should this concept move forward based on agreeable terms between the party. So while the private development parties will be responsible for completing design, project, entitlement work, City 2 will need to complete various activities. And while some of these will be further defined during the ENA period, we acknowledge we'll be participates or take the lead on build out of the public plaza, a shared parking facility as proposed on development block 3 in the proposed concept, as well as various planning activities. So the city recently received state funding to make amendments to the Grand Gateway Master Plan document. The plan area had not previously included 2 parcels, as the city did not own those properties yet. And these include the Roadway Inn site and the site of the former Old Town Inn, the parcel adjacent to Capitol Bowl. And as such, we need to make amendments to incorporate these properties. and make additional revisions to include policy and implementation changes based on documents that were approved after the Grand Gateway Master Plan, including Washington Realized, which was completed in 2015, Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Master Plan completed in 2019, and Washington District Public Art Implementation Plan completed in 2020, and the Mobility Action Plan update, which is soon to be adopted. So the Grand Gateway Master Plan contemplates the need for a shared public parking structure. For high-density developments, parking requirements and costs are a significant impediment to development feasibility, and therefore structured parking can cost $35,000 or more per space. So under a shared public parking structure, the city would own and operate the parking facility, and we can unbundle this responsibility from the private developer. And there are certainly advantages in this approach in that we could and intend to pursue grant funds that support this parking model in infill urban areas. And as discussed in the development site layout slide, the city will own and maintain a public plaza which will feature public art and other amenities. So the features and programming considered for the public plaza could be further explored during engagement activities related to the planning updates. Those are my updates in the Grand Gateway Master Plan, Grand Gateway Development Opportunity. Anybody have any questions related to to the discussion on Bridge District Financing Update as well as Grand Gateway? I really appreciate you taking the time to sit through all that. I know it was really dense and a lot of information, but I appreciate all that you have, the feedback that you have to provide.
Can you please go back to the slide that shows the conceptual layout? One more back. Right there. So how was Capitol Bull engaged in this conversation?
So Capitol Bull was engaged when we did the Grand Gateway Master Plan, and we also talked to them when we were in the process of buying the old town. So I believe his name was Ross, who was the father. I talked to several times. We talked about ideas about how we could incorporate their site, and ultimately they wanted to expand to the west, not to the east, and so they were very interested in the city, surprise, surprise, acquiring the Flamingo to help in a future condition, help them facilitate an expansion to the west. I believe Ross passed away several years ago, and I haven't had a conversation with his son in a while since we purchased the Flamingo, but we have had lots of conversations with them. I will also share that when we relocated the AT&T cell phone tower that was on Tower Court, we called up Ross and said, hey, you should contact AT&T. You have this great lot in the back that you're not doing anything with. You can make really substantially a lot of money by moving them to that location. And so I think that that's actually where AT&T went. So we try to engage our business owners as much as we can when it comes to these potential real estate opportunities, but ultimately what he wanted to do and the regulatory environment that we have to operate in were not very compatible, but we've always maintained a really productive communication and tried to help them along with their vision as much as they've tried to help us along with the public's, a vision and the council's vision that is represented in the Grand Gateway Master Plan.
I appreciate that. It's been 10 or 15 years of promising we're going to sell your property to expand. And I would when I saw this, my heart fell.
Yeah.
So as long as we are not taking that opportunity away, and yes, when we remodeled with the intention of buying the Flamingo.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm happy with that. I just want to make sure that we're not surprising Ron.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
It's a possibility. It has been a bit of a gap since the last time we spoke. But like I said, the last time that we had a conversation was actually when we acquired the roadway, and they were like, "When are you going to buy the Flamingo?" And we're working on it. So
Might be worth just walking down, having lunch, introducing yourself, telling them what's up.
I know his son from previous interactions, but yeah, I will. We'll make sure that we bring Tracy over, because I'm not sure that Tracy's had a chance. That's our director, has had a chance to have a conversation with them about the future of the Flamingo. So we'll make sure that happens.
Okay, perfect. I am thrilled to death that you finally sold it and are going to build something there. And I would also say no food trucks. They are environmentally unfriendly and local restaurant unfriendly.
Thank you.
Quick question. Noting that this project is within 3 business districts, including the Bridgeway district, who would decide if they would get tier 1 versus tier 2?
These properties are not in this side of it. So
Oh,
like
okay.
the West Gateway Place, you know, the affordable housing developments that are on the southern part of Tower Bridge Gateway, those are in the Bridge District. These parts are primarily in the Washington District.
Okay, so this doesn't qualify for tier 1.
It won't be impacted by the Bridge District financing strategy,
Okay.
the build out of these.
And then I guess another question really quickly. I guess the thought that came to mind as we're talking about other mechanisms, trade-offs for keeping reduced fees for development fees, has the city considered like another back-end mechanism being like once the project is fully developed and profitable that they contribute to like the city's affordable housing trust fund?
What's that? I'll give it a check. So this project, it will have 117 affordable housing units.
I meant like just not related just to this project. I guess it was more for the 440 West development, the Black Pine project, or just generally speaking when we're talking about reducing development fees for developers in the various regions that the various business districts that, you know, in addition to shorter vesting period, so we get our infrastructure, infrastructure development fees on the back end, also that they contribute, you know, to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
Mark, I can try to jump in, Commissioner Kim. In terms of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, so any residential development in the city has to comply with our affordable housing ordinance. So they can comply in many ways. The main one, we typically start off discussions with, you should build affordable units within your projects. But there are reasons in certain developments, and especially depending on the location of those projects, where we will propose or the developer will request that they be allowed to pay a fee. So we do from time to time, and we do it quite often, to be honest with you, support and recommend to the city council that developers be allowed to pay an in lieu fee that goes into the housing trust fund, which is ultimately what we use to provide gap financing for these affordable housing developments. So you mentioned the project, Black Pine, they actually paid a fee into the housing trust fund. I don't recall the fee off the top of my head, but they did pay into the housing trust fund to meet their affordable housing obligation.
Thank you for that. I guess I was just talking about in addition to the 25%, because like I know Westack is not in Davis, but in Davis, they're actually increasing development impact fees for all developments, for all developers, including, you know, having them pay in addition to having either on-site or in lieu affordable housing, like them paying something into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in perpetuity, just so that they can develop the project. One of the projects that are proposed with that exact mechanism is the new Covell Village proposal, where after they develop everything and everything is profitable, then they have to pay an additional fee to the housing fund in perpetuity for that project. So just an idea of like how to balance giving them more reduced fees, because I actually think if we can continually to reduce the fee up front, that will just attract more development, but then they just need to pay more in the back end. So I think shorter vesting period makes total sense to me now, but then if they can also pay more funds to the affordable housing or into whatever other education district funds as well, that makes sense.
Kim, I do appreciate what it is that you're recommending. So I will add just another piece layer to this. So the 25% affordable housing that's required, one, it's 10% in excess of our ordinance. So we're getting 10% more affordable units that are required by our own inclusionary housing ordinance. Second, affordable housing is never just funded by tax credits. There is often and almost always local contribution. And so we have to weigh the fact that that local contribution comes from us. And so if we're like, hey, you have to give us more money on the back end or on the front end, we're often paying ourselves because they're saying, well, then that will increase the gap financing that we need in order to make this affordable housing project work. So what I think is very elegant about the RFP, I'm slightly patting myself on the back because I wrote it when I say that, but what I mean by that is that it's very clear that this will be a disposition and development agreement. And by being a development agreement, it will be a contract between the city and this developer. So as we are negotiating the terms of that contract, we can be mindful of these kinds of ideas that you're bringing forward, whether it's no food trucks or it's contribute more to the affordable housing scheme. Don't just do the bare minimum. We want you to do something more. So whether that more is, let's reduce the discounts, right? Instead of it being what we're required to have by the legislature, which may be moderate reduction, we could go very low and extremely low. Those units are very difficult to build because they require huge subsidies, but there's a huge demand for them. So there's lots of ways to get at, instead of going for a 4% tax credit, we go for a 9% tax credit. It may take us longer to get those units, but we could get more subsidy that way. So I appreciate what you're saying, that we need to look for as many opportunities to fund affordable housing in West Sacramento, that we should not just be satisfied with 25%, that we need to look and see what our development partners are bringing to the table. And I'll take that to heart as I'm negotiating the terms. And Commissioner White, I just wanted to share that we've actually not sold the property yet. Mark is here because we're commencing negotiations to sell the property. So I really appreciate this kind of feedback because it really does help us bring to our city council, when we discuss price and terms with them, what are the things that we heard from you that are important, which are things like we want the affordable housing programs to really receive support. We don't want to see them shortchanged. So I thank you very much for those comments, and I'm happy to answer any questions about what I just said, but I wanted to share that we are at the very beginning of our negotiations, so this feedback is very, very valuable. Thank you.
Hi there. I do have a question about the proposed concepts. I note that there are no renderings for the 802 Delta Lane project that I believe there was a groundbreaking for in June. Is that project going to be affected in any way by this new concept?
I'm sorry, could you repeat of which the groundbreaking for?
802 Delta Lane with Jamboree Housing.
Raul, please.
Yeah, so we actually do have renderings of the site. We have them on the website, and we can make that available for you. It's not going to impact the project in any way. That project is currently under construction, and it's anticipated to be completed at the end of next year.
All righty, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Mark, regarding the parking, I might have missed it, but the parking is designed specifically for whom? And is it free parking, paid parking? What is?
So the hasn't been determined yet, but typically a strategy is for that. In that we're we've evaluated not only here but in Bridge District is that the city would lead in developing shared parking facilities, and it's long documented that parking is a huge cost on our development, on the not only the development community, but in the built environment. So typically there are strategies in which we would charge for that parking, generating revenue. So it would not be a total loss to the city by constructing this parking facility, so that we could earn back some of that through revenue generated by it, paid for by occupants such as residents or those who are attending some of the commercial areas. Anything you want to add to that one, Katie?
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for your time and attention. I know we're going back and forth. It's a little like musical chairs, so thank you for that. The policy that the city has currently adopted in terms of its urban parking is that we attempt to, in a structured parking like this one that we're proposing, we build the first floor. And the first floor is used for public purposes. Those public purposes can be anything like Mark mentioned. It can be used for overflow parking for the river cats. It can be used to provide parking offset. So we do something called unbundling parking, which means that you don't have to build parking with your urban infill housing development or your office or commercial. You can say there's 80 parking spaces that the city controls that are available 24 hours a day for paid parking. And I'm going to assume that the 40 parking spaces that I need to provide are going to be met by that shared parking resource. So what we typically do is we'll say, how many potential users are within 1,000 feet of walking from this parking structure? That's the number of people that we would expect to have demand for that ground floor. We contribute that through our parking fund, which brings in the revenue and then reinvests that revenue in infrastructure that can create more revenue. So it's a sustainable funding source. And so this would be one of our first forays into a actual parking structure, but it's not uncommon for us to assist in podium parking or parking structures. We do it with affordable housing projects a lot. This will be one of our first ones. We're doing it for mixed income and having it be a full-blown structure.
And in the proposal, I mean, I think I know the answer, but this would be city-owned?
We haven't figured that out yet. That's part of the deal terms. So if there's a preference or a desire for more information on that, that is part of the reason that why we're here, is that we're beginning those conversations with the developer. Mhm.
Any other question? All right. Again, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much, commissioners. Thank you very much for being attentive to these presentations. I know went a little long-winded, but hopefully gained a lot of insights into some of the work that we're going to be doing upcoming in the next year, particularly related to Bridge District, and also as this project over at Grand Gateway it progresses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very exciting. Thank you.
All right, and with that, we are moving on to agenda item number 3, a presentation from the West Sacramento Chamber of Commerce on their annual report.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. This evening, we have Denise Domke, who's the CEO and President of the West Sacramento Chamber of Commerce, who will be giving the presentation.
Come on. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair White and Commissioners. It's great to be here for this annual conversation. Before I get started, 2 things. First, that was fascinating, and topics that actually are addressed in some ways in this report, and that the Chamber remains engaged in conversations and had several meetings with economic development and housing about the proposed reduction to impact fees for that little micro area of our city. So it was great to get that report. The second thing is, so there's a typo in this report it seems, right, no matter how many eyes are on something, I'm sitting, listening, thinking, oh, that says August 31st, 2022. Should be 2023. And this report is getting our contract back on a regular schedule. During the pandemic, we had a kind of an emergency amendment to produce the Support Dreams Shop Local campaign. And so this is getting that back on track. As those of you that sat through this report in years past know that it's as much as anything a conversation and questions and interaction from this commission, as well, rather than me reading you what you have in front of you. So I formatted this. In this new contract, there is a very clear schedule of performance, and it makes it easy to whip through it, and happy to answer any questions. Several opportunities that provided themselves in the course of this contract period. We, the Chamber, in collaboration with our city partners, and in this case, the West Sac Police Department, created an industry-specific group around manufacturing and distribution. And the chief came to us and asked if we would help produce a conversation with industries in the Southport area as it relates to theft and vandalism that they were experiencing. We were happy to do that. We were very involved in the conversations around the Small Business Assistance Program that was recently supported, well, not recently now, but probably 6 months ago, 8 months ago, supported by council, and we anticipate moving forward in that relationship and that collaborative partnership. We, with conversations both related to cannabis retail and small business support, specifically micro businesses and home-based businesses, as the economy and how business is happening is changing, we began reaching out to small micro businesses and offering them a short-term, a one-year mentoring program with the chamber to answer the question as we were looking at small business assistance and what that would look like and who would create it. There's the always very important question, well, what do they really need? Right? Are we going to design a program that has real value? And so, or are we going to contract it out and check it off a list? And that's not usually how West Sacramento, and the city of West Sacramento, would in partnership with the chamber functions. So we just started kind of reaching out into that community and have both first in 2023, as you'll see noted in this report, and upcoming in 2024, have a couple of small businesses that we'll be taking under our wing.
I just want to mention that we actually don't have the report, so I'm wondering, Nuvi, if you could scroll down to the page that Denise is on.
Oh, I'm just jumping around, which is not too convenient.
Sorry.
I didn't know you didn't have the report.
Yeah,
It wasn't included in your packet.
it was not.
Oh, gosh, and I wasted all that explanation about the typo. So
Commissioners,
then
can you
none
s-
of you have had a chance to read it?
Commissioners, can you see it on your screen?
We can see the
Can
first
you
page.
scroll the next page? Yeah.
Well, if you haven't had a chance to review it and to read it, then let's start at page 1. And we'll just kind of go through it, just jump in. As I said, this conversation is usually most effective when it is in fact a conversation. So if you have questions, anything that we can add to this, but with the business outreach assistance and support visitations, it's 1 a quarter, and they're called out here. There are many opportunities for the chamber and the city to work together to help if a business is having a problem, if they need someone to kind of move them through the process. And very often those don't get listed here because they're kind of confidential, business interactions. But these are 4 that were easy for us to pull out. Nippon Shokin, continuing problem. They are expanding, and they requested information and help about workforce assistance and some challenges they were having around utilities. Origin Materials, which is headquartered here in West Sacramento, are growing, and they were very interested. We were able to work together to bring Yolo County into the conversation about potential subsidized employment programs and on-the-job training. Thick Vatos and Tacos, I don't know if you've had their food. Please, you should try that if you have not. I think now they're working with Bigger Bike Dog, so they're there. And just began some kind of basic business mentoring, quarterly meetings, and a sponsored chamber membership. And we, at a request of a council member, we met with Riversong Coffee Roasters and started talking with them about their home-based business. And it's you'll be seeing more about him and their business, I'm sure. So I'm on page 2 now.
Denise, you mentioned that these are just 4 the visitations, but you've done a lot more visitations, right?
Yeah, most of that's Yes.
How many do you think you did this last year? Like over a dozen?
It's less visitation in this new business economy than it is conversation and meeting,
Oh, yeah.
you know, providing resources and helping to facilitate issues that they may be having. So
Okay.
I would think 60
Oh, wow.
in a
Yeah,
year,
awesome.
you know, like at least 5 times a month. So as the city continues to work on their efforts to update the business license list and outreach around that, we of course assist with that. We spent quite a bit of time working with the previous economic development manager and talking with groups like California Capital and some of the other chambers to see how we might bring into West Sacramento a small business assistance program. In January of every year, we present a 2020, in this year, 2023 labor law update. And we use the business license list to reach out and invite all businesses to participate in it. I talked about the public forum, conversations like which I thought was fascinating. This last conversation that we listened to, the presentation on the Bridge District and impact fees and, tiered structures around making that whole process sustainable, is a good example of the kinds of conversations that we have on a regular basis. State and federal legislative advocacy, the chamber participates at the federal level through Cap to Cap, at the state level through our Economic and Government Affairs Forum, and have had measured success in that. And then we produce a couple of events. State of the City was produced by the Chamber as part of our contract with the city on May the 18th. Many of you were there in attendance. The statistics are included. Last year's tree lighting was, all the details are here, of course, and we will be throwing that party again this Friday. So we hope to see you as we welcome in the season with our community. As schedules and staffing variations allow, the chamber and the city have for decades met once a month and had a conversation around hot topics and issues in business and opportunities for us to be effective together. So that's it. Thoughts? Feedback? What are you hearing? You are the Economic Development and Housing Commission. Any generalized feedback from, your neighbors or businesses that what are you seeing in the community? We're seeing kind of a continual quiet dwindling of business that is fed in some ways by a continued problem with staffing, with employment issues, and in many cases, just kind of a shrinking of their business model so that where they may have been engaged in West Sacramento as part of a bigger business plan. Commissioner Kim?
Yes. Was the chamber, did you reach out to the business that apparently was vandalized yesterday? There was like a business that was vandalized in West Sac, and it was on the news. Barely.
There were several businesses, I think, off of
that. Yeah,
Harbor.
this week.
Yeah.
Does the chamber provide any assistance or support when that happens?
If our members reached out, I know that there was quite a bit of activity from businesses. For the chamber, it would be, we could go business to business. That's not usually typically. It's a broader scope, but things like offering helping with if people are feeling like they're getting a slow response from public safety, but I haven't heard any of that. And I think that they're still working on it. So that'd be a pretty quick turnaround.
So when it comes to visitations, that's 60 visitations, awesome. When it comes to business assistance and like support, besides the mentorship program, what other like metrics or like performance indicators would you say?
Say that another way.
So like, what are the performance indicators or metrics that you use as the chamber to measure like business support or business assistance? Like, I know you have the mentorship program, but
which is a new process.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of, we get regular referrals both from the city and from other businesses to come to the chamber for assistance. And because that's part of what a chamber does, we don't really measure that individually. But if you call, and it's not required of our contract, but if you call the chamber, and several of you are, 2 of you are chamber members, that's part of what we do. We educate, we advocate, and we bring people together. We do that whether you're a chamber member or not. So it's hard for me to measure it in that way, because it's like walking into a hospital and trying to figure out how many skinned knees you saw right off the top, right? So I'm not really sure what you're asking.
I guess it wasn't the actual number I'm interested in, just the how you measure business assistance. So like total seminars, total one-on-one consulting, total business plans.
We do that as an organization separate from this contract.
Oh, that's separate from this contract.
Yeah,
Okay.
we do that as an organization and annually.
How about for this contract? How is the city, like, what are the deliverables for
You're
business
looking at the
assistance?
deliverables.
Okay.
And this is in this kind of wonky period,
Okay.
this is the report on those deliverables. I broke it out exactly by the deliverables in the amendment to the contract.
Thank you.
Kind of makes it easy to.
Sounds
Yeah.
good.
I really apologize you hadn't seen it. Yeah,
Questions from the other council members? You know, for those of you who are new, full disclosure, I'm on the board of the Chamber of Commerce, so I have no question. So it's up to you all.
Thank you for
All right, with that, we will say thank you.
Great, thank you very
And
much.
you guys can go to dinner
See you in a year.
or Friday
you.
night.
Friday night, yeah. Chris, you took my line.
I did attend the Christmas lighting ceremony last year, and I loved it.
This year will be 20 years that we've been doing it in the same format in the same place, and always really supported by council and the city manager's office and the city staff. It's become a tradition. One of the little cool things about it is Santa has been the same Santa for that entire time. He's a real beard Santa. And so if you were 8 and you came to the first one, and now you're 28 and you're bringing your kids, if you see that same Santa every single year, pretty much that's Santa. And he lives in West Sac. So it's a cool thing. Well, Santa doesn't live in West Sac, but if you're 8, you think he lives in West Sac. So
No, you think he lives at the North Pole.
yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
That's
So-
neat.
One of the cool things that I like about the tree lighting is when they built City Hall here, they planted a pine tree out front specifically so that we'd have a Christmas tree, a built-in Christmas tree every year.
And not
And-
ship it in every single time.
Exactly, but you know, one of the things they didn't think about the fact is trees grow. And they have to keep buying new ornaments and lights because the tree's taller every year.
Yes. Yeah. And they also built in the landscaping plan, they put power for that tree to be lit. You know, there's a whole setup there for it. So That was a donation. Dan Ramos donated that tree. It was like this big, and we used to bring a bigger one in because it looked a little Charlie Brown. It's definitely come into its own.
All right, thank you. All right, we are moving on to item number 3, consideration of the approval of the minutes for the meeting way back in July of our Economic Development and Housing Commission meeting. And so I need a motion to approve, and remember to say your name, please.
Commissioner Kim, motion to approve the minutes from the meeting in August? I
July.
guess. Oh, July, yes.
Commissioner Kemp, second.
Hey, we have a moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that motion carries. And because we have no members of the public, I assume we have no public comments. And
No,
so
we
we
don't.
are
No, we do not.
on to our final item, our general administrative function, and it's our director's report and any communications.
Yes, good evening, Chairperson White. So Tracy Michael unfortunately was not able to be here tonight with us, but I do have a couple of updates for you that I think will be of interest. The first is related to West Apartments. On Monday, the city issued a temporary certificate of occupancy on the project, which is located on the Bridge District. This 286-unit, 5-story mixed-use development is the last market rate project to be delivered as part of the city's Prop 1C obligation. You heard about the Prop 1C in Mark's presentation. As some of you may recall, that Prop 1C grant was awarded to the city back in 2009 and funded over $23 million in infrastructure improvements in the Bridge District. But in exchange, the city and their development partners had to construct 731 residential units, including 198 affordable housing units. West Gateway Place Phase 2, which is the 60-unit affordable housing project that is currently under development, will satisfy the remaining affordable housing unit obligations. And as I mentioned earlier today, that schedule is supposed to be completed at the end of next year. Next update is regarding the Clark Pheasant property. On September 27th, the City Council approved a contract with Turton Commercial Real Estate to assist staff with marketing and brokerage services related to the sale and reuse of that property. Turton is currently working with staff to prepare marketing materials and are working on development proposal evaluation criteria. We anticipate starting the development proposal solicitation phase in early 2024. And last but not least, as you just heard as well, this Friday is the holiday tree lighting from 6 p.m. and to 8:30 p.m. So we hope to see all of you there. And that are all the informational items that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. And do we have any communications from any of the commissioners? Okay, I do have something to share with the commissioners and with all of the public that are watching as well. There's an organization called Valley Vision, a nonprofit. Some of you may be familiar with it. Valley Vision is currently leading a proposal for a grant program to put in charging stations, mostly in distressed areas, lower income areas, areas that are devoid of charging. They're mostly looking at multifamily properties, but they're also interested in some commercial properties. They are already in touch with Stephanie and Larry here about what to do, but they have been unable to find any participants in West Sacramento, in Yolo County, in fact. But should you know a property owner that would be, it has to be the person. One of the problems with finding multifamily property owners is they're buried. They're investment companies, and it's hard to find the person. So if you are aware of a place that could use a charging station and would be a partner in this grant, I encourage you to contact Stephanie Chan or Larry Lynn with the city. They are leading that charge, or talk to me and I will refer you to Kathy at Valley Vision.
What's the expectation about that the homeowner or the property owner would contribute?
This is unpaid, there's no cost share from the property owner. It would, if they are successful in winning the award, and to go to the award, you have to say, here are the property owners have to sign a letter of commitment. So they have to do a little work up front to do it, but there's no cost share from the property owner. Typically in these grants, and I have to look into this one, if there are curb improvements or they have to do some new ADA striping or something else, that is on the property owner. But Valley Vision may have the money to pay for that from a different pot of money.
Commissioner White, is this just property owners in the Valley Vision Greater Sacramento jurisdiction, right? So
Correct.
not just West Sacramento, we're talking about
Correct.
everybody.
They have
Okay.
plenty of property owners in Sacramento. They have none in Yolo County.
Oh, so it's really Yolo County that we're looking for. Okay.
Yeah.
I have some
Yes.
thoughts.
So any other updates from anybody else besides? Okay, it was good timing when Kathy reached out to me today. I said, hey, I'm talking to a bunch of people tonight that may know. All right. So with that, we need a motion to adjourn, please.
Commissioner Vasquez motions to adjourn. Do you need the time?
Yes, please.
At 7:47.
Commissioner Guerra, second.
Hey, we have a move and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody else want to stay and miss dinner? Okay, with that, we are adjourned.